Hi guys, so you're welcome to the third video, and in this video is going to be a continuation of our project that we've been building so far, where I intend making use of Go as the back end. We're going to utilize gRPC, and we're going to use other technologies like Postgres, and it's going to be a microservice application where we have the broker, the inventory backend, and the authentication service. So this is the code repository of what we've already built. We have three repositories here. We have the authentication service, we have the inventory service, and we have the broker service. So I'm going to go ahead and clone this repository afresh so that we can start from where we've stopped the last time. So let's start from cloning the auth service. So let me get it, go to my terminal. So this is the root of my working directory. So I'll just say git clone. All right, so that has been cloned. Let me say ls. So this is what I just cloned now, the authentication service. So I'll go ahead and clone the broker service. Let's go to the repository again, the broker service. Let me clone that. Go to my terminal, git clone, paste. All right, so clear the screen, ls. So I have two services cloned in my root, my working directory. We have the auth service, we have the broker service. So the next service I need to clone is the inventory service. So let's go back to the repo, the inventory service, this. So let's clone that, git clone. Good. So ls, you see I have these three repository: the broker, the inventory, and the authentication service. Let's open this using VS Code dot. So I have every of these different repositories opened in my VS Code, and from my previous video you would have noticed that I have this diagram. We are still working with it, where we have a user that makes a request to the broker service, and the broker service is acting as the load balancer that redirects the call to the authentication service and then the inventory service. This is done through gRPC call. So the broker service is more like a client, and then the authentication service and inventory service are like the backend servers, that receive the client call from the broker service, and then respond to the client, which then responds to the user, right? So this is what this is the mental architecture of what we wanted to build. And I made mention that we're going to make use of gRPC as a technology, as a protocol for our transportation between these microservices, using TCP, of course. And then we're going to run these different services using Docker, and we're going to use Docker Compose to manage these Docker images or Docker services, as the case may be. So initially, we have these three build out, and I'm going to try to run all of them so that we can test and make sure that everything is working fine, right? So bear in mind that this is a microservice application. So these repositories are all independent repositories, which means you can run them independently, but they can communicate with each other as the application mature along the line. So, but in this today's video, what we want to achieve is building Docker images for the broker service, for authentication service, and for inventory service. We are going to compile these different services into their binaries because we are using Go, and then try to run that binary using Docker images. And then from that, we can then manage those Docker images using Docker Compose, right? So we are all in line with what we want to do. So let's outline what we want to achieve today so that all of us, we know what we want to do. So first, we are going to build the binaries for the auth. the broker, and the inventory service, right? These are different repositories, so know that. Then secondly, we are going to create a Docker file for the above services, right? And then thirdly, we are going to build Docker images for each of them for the above services, right? And then we are going to run the Docker images as a container, right? It will now become a containerized application. Then we're going to run it. Then after that, what we are going to do is, because we're going to make use of different commands, it will be very inconvenient for us to keep repeating those commands to run these different applications. So we're going to, harmonize those commands and put them into a makefile. So we're going to create a makefile where we are going to, itemize those commands that we'll be using repetitively, and then we are going to create a Docker compose file to manage the services, right? To manage the services. Okay, so this is what we are going to do today. One, build binaries for the different microservices, the auth, broker, and inventory. Then we're going to create a Docker file. Let me spell this correct. Docker file for the above services that we've built their binaries. And then we're going to build the Docker images for them. And then run those Docker images, create a makefile for the different commands we use during this build and running process. And then we're going to manage all our services, the Docker containers, using a Docker compose file. So buckle up, let's delve into the process of building the application. So first of all, I'm going to try to run these applications the way we have been running it before, right? So let me use my terminal here. I believe that should also work. So let me first check out into, this is not too clear. Let's use the main terminal, right? So this is what I have here. So let's check out into our broker service. And then how do I run it initially? What I do was so we have a couple of files here. So inside our CMD API, when I ls, you see we have handler, main.go, and route. So how we ran it before was we say go run, we say main.go, routes.go, and handler.go, right? And that works well for us, right? So let's wait, it starts. Let's open another shell terminal and run the broker and the authentication service. Let me go back to the authentication service. So what we ran here was the broker service. So let's start the authentication service the same way we did for broker. So cd to the authentication service into the CMD API, right? Then we find our working files, right? So let's say go run main.go, routes.go, and handler.go. So this is going to start on port 8081. The broker is going to run on port 8080, while the authentication service is running on port 8081. So we are going to open another terminal to run the inventory service. So let's go to the inventory service folder. So this is my authentication service. Let's go back, clear the screen. So the inventory service is this. So let's cd into this folder, cd to the CMD API, clear. So we say go run main.go, routes.go, and then handler.go. So this is going to run on port 8082 if I'm not mistaken. So that's it. So you can see this is what we are doing from the beginning. We created these different repositories, the broker service, we have the authentication service, we have the inventory service. They are all different applications running on different ports, and this is how we were running it previously. But this is not the best way or the most effective way to run this application. Assuming we have like 20 different files or packages that we are working with, would we be able to say go run main.go, routes.go, handler.go, users.go, and every other different files we've created or we are working with? So what we are going to do is to instead compile these different Go application into their binaries and then use Docker to now run these binaries. Okay, so I'm going to try to go to my Postman. Let's even see if the application is running. So yes, it's running. Previously, if you watched the previous video, you see that we have this working. Create user returns the user we sent, inventory user. So these are all dummy data from the back end, and they are all, so the call to the back end is working. This is a call to the inventory service on port 8082 is working. This is a call to the authentication service on port 8081, which is working. And then this is a call to the broker service, which is all working, right? But bear in mind that this application will, of course, later on all communicate with each other via gRPC, okay? But currently, they are all independent applications, all running on their different ports, okay? So that's fine. So what I'm going to do is to stop all this, and then we try to compile, build this Go application into their individual binaries, and then run these binaries using Docker. Okay, so how do we do that? So let me start with the broker service. Let me go back to the root directory of my application. Okay, ls clear. So you can see I have these 3 microservices here. Okay, right? So that is what I have in my in the root of my folder that I'm working with. So first of all, let's first build the broker, and then have the binary of the broker, and then we do the same thing for the inventory service, and then we do the same thing for the order and have these binaries. Okay, and then we create Docker file for them and run it using Docker. Okay, so first let's seed into our broker. You can see I've not yet started coding. Actually, I'm still in my terminal, showing you how to run these applications, right? Because this is my code here. You can see them here, right? So let me make it bigger. Let me say view, appearance. Let's say zoom. Should we zoom in, right? Yeah, zoom in will make it bigger. So this is what we have. You can see those different folders here, right? So this is the auth, broker, inventory. They are all different repositories, but I just have them all organized in the same root directory. Okay, so that being said, what I will do now is to create a binary for the authentication service. Once I do that, I'll create a binary for the broker service. After doing that, I will create the binary for inventory service. I'm repeating myself so that if it will stick, right? So whatever I said before, I keep repeating it, right? So that it will stick. So we are going to build them, and while building them, it will generate the binaries, which we will then run using Docker. Okay, so let's use the terminal and seed into these folders. So let's seed into the auth service, cd, and then if you check, you can see these are my files. So what, for us to build our application and derive a binary for them, so I'm going to let me reduce this and then see if we can have space. All right, so what I will do, I will now say env, for instance, go 00s, and then, so what I want to do, I want to specify the target environment where I'm going to run this binary, right? My target environment is on Linux. So most of this command will not work for Windows, right? It will not work for Windows, but I'm going to provide the list of this command for Windows. When I push this update, you are going to see that for Windows, but this will specifically work for Mac OS. Most of the command I'm using here, right? So I want to specify the target environment where I'm going to run this particular binary. Okay, so my target environment is on Linux, and then I'm going to say CGO. So you mostly do this enabled, CGO enabled equals to 0. So I'm currently disabling a C library so that it could generate a static binaries that will be portable to run in environments such as Docker. So that's why I'm doing CGO enable. So yeah, I'm disabling a particular C library to make this portable to be able to run in Docker containers. Okay, so these are just temporary environment. And then what else do I want to do? I now say go build. Okay, this should be small letters. Go build the outputs. What should I call the that stash? So let me call this authentications. Let me call it auth app. So our binaries will be the Go application. The auth service will be built, and then the binaries will be generated in a file called auth app. We are going to see that. And what do I want to build? I want to build every files within the cmd/API folder. So once I run this command, we are going to see that particular file called auth app will be created for us. Okay, so enter ls. So you can see I have auth app. So the binary for my auth service have been created. So I'm going to do this for the broker service and also for the inventory. So I'm copy it and check out to the other. So let's cd into broker and do the same thing. Cd and then repeat the same command, but in this case I'm going to call the output to be, let's call it broker app, right? ls. So you can see broker app, the binary has been created for me. Let's clear the screen. So let's do the same thing for cd dot dot. Let's go to our inventory. Let's cd into inventory. All right, cd and do the same thing. Let's go back. Okay, so this case, let's call this inventory app. So before I run these commands, just for us to understand why I'm doing this or why I'm running these different commands or creating binaries for this build, right? First of all, you saw how I ran these different microservices, whereby I say go run, I say main.go, handler.go, routes.go. I checked into the auth services. I did the same thing. Go run, main.go, handler.go, routes.go. I checked out into inventory service and I did the same thing. It is not efficient. You can't run it effectively this way, because what if I have 100 files? What will happen? Will I have to kind of mention all of them in my command line and run it? It's very impossible. So we have to build our Go application into the binaries and use Docker to run it so that it will be easier for us to run. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. So let's do this for inventory ls. So I have inventory app created. So let's go to our, so you can see in the different repositories, let's first check for auth service. You can see the auth has this binary, so it's they are byte codes, zeros and ones, and so you may not, I don't have a VS Code plugin that can display that for us to see. And then you can see the broker in the broker microservice, and in the inventory you can see the inventory app, the binary created. So this is step one of what we want to do, right? I told you we are going to create a binary. This is one. create the binaries of the build binaries of the auth broker and then inventory service. So what's the next thing we're going to do? We're going to create a Docker file for these different services so that we can use the Docker file to kind of run run the services. Okay, so what we're going to do now, so let me go to the auth service. Okay, let's start with the broker service because broker service is more like the load balancer. Okay, so let's start with broker, even though it's the second one. Yeah, so within the broker folder, let me create Docker file. Right, so if you go to Docker Hub, you can see, let's go to Docker Hub and see the Docker images where you can that we can use. So let's see Golang. Okay, I don't know why this is working. That's fine. So Golang, I'm searching for Golang. Right, so you can see different images that are supported here. Maybe we're going to use a lightweight image, maybe 1.2.2 Alpine can be of can serve too, right? So we can use it. So let's go down and see how we can use it here. You can see how you can use it to create. So from Go 1.2.3, we can use 1.2.2 dash Alpine, the one that we wanted to use, right? And then copy everything, install the modules, build, and then run. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So let's go to my, so I will say from Golang 1.22 dash Alpine, let me call it as let me say as builder, right? Because we may use multi-stage build to build. So we've done this. So what does this? So we this is how to create a Docker file. You first define the image you want to use, just like we saw here. The image that was used here is 1.2.3, and we decided to use 1.22 dash Alpine, right? So let's specify the working directory that we want to use. So let's say work there, let's say is /app. Okay, that's what we want to do here. So let's then maybe install any other package we want to use, because we may use some packages like make and then git, right? So let's use run to say apk. So add no catch, what is this on my keyboard, dash no catch, and then we say git and make. So that's what's going to install for us. It's going to install git and make for us while building. Then the next thing we want to do is to copy everything within the broker repository into the Docker container, right? So we now say copy dot, right? So it's going to copy everything into the app directory. Okay, so the next thing we are going to do is to run and install every other Go modules that we have, or Go packages, right? So we say run, you say Go mode download. So it's going to download all dependencies for us, and then so that the container will be able to run our application. So why I'm doing this is because we may want to write tests, and this test may run within the container. Okay. So, but remember, we've built our application and we have a binary. So it's the binary that we're going to run now. So we say cmd, what is it going to run? So within our app, we already have broker app, right? So we are going to say broker. We're going to, within our app, what we're going to run is /app, and then we call it broker app, right? So this is how to create a Docker file. You specify the image you want to use. You specify where the working directory of where all the files your code will be copied into. I now decide to install some certain softwares like Git and Make. Then copied everything within my repository into the app folder, and then install all dependencies using go mode download. It will do that. Then after that, it will now run what I have built. So if you observe this particular Docker file, I didn't build anything here because I've already built using a different command, right? If you remember, we use these different commands to build, right? So I don't need to now within my Docker file specify build. So if you look at what we have here, you can see they are saying build. So do you see the similarity between what we've built, the command we use in building, and what is here? This is the command we use in building. Build, we specify the output, inventory app, and then the files that we want to build. Look at what we have here. You see build, they specify the output in that the build should be in bin app, right? And every other file within that particular repository will be copied and built, right? So we don't need to run this command again because we've already run it in our terminals, right? So let's go back. So I've done this for the broker, so I'm going to repeat the same thing for the authentication and for the inventory service. So to be fast, I'm going to copy this and then come to my auth service, create a new file called dockerfile, right? And paste what I have here. So in this case, what am I going to paste here? What am I going to copy? Is going to be auth app, not broker app, because our binary here is called auth app, right? Good. So what is remaining? We've done that for the auth broker. So for inventory, let's create a file, docker file. Let me paste something. What do we call it? Inventory app, right? We've already built it, so no need of specifying build again. So we have our builds. We have our Docker files created for these 3 different repositories. Okay, so the next thing we are going to do is to try to run this particular microservices, the auth service, the broker service, and the inventory service. We're going to run them, and they will all run in their own individual ports. So to run the different repositories or different services, if you remember, let's go back to what we have here. So we've created the Docker files for each repository. So the next thing is to what? The third step is to build the Docker images for what we already have, right? So that's the third step, build Docker images for the authentication service, for the broker service, and for the inventory service, right? So how do we do that? Okay, so let's check into these different repositories, build the Docker images. After building, then we will run those Docker images. They will become containers, and then we access the services on our Postman and be sure it is running. Then we can then go ahead and create the makefile. So let me not talk too much. Let's first do the third step, building the Docker images. So let me go to my terminal and then build the Docker images for this different repository. Right, so where am I? I'm in inventory service. Let's start with our broker service first. Let's do the third step, build those Docker images that we've created. So let's cd into this, ls clear, ls again, let me cut dockerfile. So we have it here. Okay, so how do we build? So for you to build, you say docker build -t. Of course, you have to have Docker installed on your system, because from the beginning of this course, I remember that the course is not totally for beginners. You must have some form of experience. Okay, you will have Docker desktop installed on your system for you to be able to run Docker. Okay, and then you will need to install make also to be able to run make commands. But we have not reached the area where we have to organize the course into makefile. But first, have Docker desktop installed. So for us to build the broker service, you say Docker build. Let's call it broker app. That's the name we want to call it. The image that it will build for the broker service. So we want to build an image based on the Docker file we've already created. The image is built based on the Docker file, which is go 1.22-alpine. So we're going to create an image called broker app for go for the broker service. Okay, so when I enter, so let's wait, we call the image broker app, so it's building. Right, let's wait for it to finish. So it's going to take some time depending on the speed of your internet. My internet isn't that fast, but then let's hope it's not going to waste a lot of time. So it's building. So the build is completed for the broker service. So when I do, if you remember, what I call my image for broker service, I call it broker app. So if I do Docker images, I will see broker app. You can see broker app image was created for me just 18 seconds ago. So I will do the same thing for the authentication service. So let's go to the authentication service. Let's check out into auth service, cd. So to build, what do you say? You say docker build -t. What do we call it? We say let's call it auth app, right? So that's the names will be okay. So we have a problem here. It says it requires okay, we have to specify that it's going to be within this particular repository. So that's why we have to put that dot. It doesn't know where to build from. So this was fast enough. So we finished building. So when I say Docker images, I will see the auth image. You can see it. It was created. Clear. Let's go back. So let's build an image for the inventory service, cd inventory. Clear. I can say docker build -t. That's the name. We want to give it a name, a tag, -t. Then let's call it inventory app in this current repository. That's why we put that full stop at the end. Good. So when I say let me clear the screen. When I say Docker images, you can see I have these 3 images built for me: the inventory, the auth app, and the broker app. That is what we just created. So let's clear. So what I want to do now, after creating these images, you have to have Docker desktop installed for you to do this, right? So look, this is my Docker desktop, right? So let's go back to our code. So the next thing I want to do now, based on what we have outlined for today, is to run these images. So we've done the first step, the third step. So let's run the image. Let's run the Docker images, the auth app, the inventory app, the broker app that we've just created. So let's run it within a container, and then we'll test the application again and see if it's running. Of course, you know, we have this application tested out in Postman. So if we test it and we have a response, then it means our Docker image and the Docker services that we created is working very well, right? So let's run this image. Let me go to my terminal and try to run them. So let's first go to our broker service. Let's cd to broker service, cd. So how do you run a Docker image, right? So there's a command to run it. So you say docker run. By the way, you are going to find it in of course you can see it. So you see what we did the other time. We say go build, we give it a name, broker app. Or here they have this. So this is what we want to try to do now. Okay, good. So you can find the commands in Docker Hub. So what we do now is say docker run. Let's say it should be iterative. Let's give it a name. So we want to give our container a name. So what's the name? So let's say call it broker service. And then the image we want to run, you know, we created the image, which is broker app, right? So when I try to run this, it should run. If it didn't run, then we'll try to troubleshoot. So let me enter. But I'm going to run this application and it's not going to run because of something, right? So if you know why when we go to our Postman this is not going to run, please say that on the comment. But this is going to start the container, but we won't be able to access this application because of something is missing, and I did that deliberately, right? Something is missing in this command. This command is going to run, start the service, the container is going to run, but we won't be able to access it via our Postman because something is missing. All right, so our application is running. When I go to Postman to access the broker service, which is running on port 8080, right? So you see connection refused. It's not working. It's not running. Why? If anybody knows that, should write it on the comment section. By the way, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe so that others can see this on their timeline. So why it's not running is because, of course, our application is running on port 8080, but we've not exposed any ports locally so that we can be able to access this application when we make that request from the Postman. So we're going to specify the port now. So that is what was missing. Okay, so let's say -p is going to run on 8080 on the local system, and of course it's running on 8080 on the Docker container, right? So when I say enter now, so something is wrong. So why is it not running? Conflict, the container name broker service already running, so docker ps. So I didn't see any container called broker service. So but we have a conflict that something is running with that particular name broker service. So let's try again and see if so docker images, I have it docker. Okay, so maybe it's terminated but we haven't deleted it. So docker ps-a. So you can see that container that was terminated, but not yet deleted. That is why we are having that conflict. So what I will do now is to delete it by saying docker rm, then the container id, and it's deleted. So when I say docker ps-a, you will no longer find it again, right? So if I go back and rerun that same command, we should be able to run it successfully. Right, so it runs successfully without issue. So let me go back to my Postman and try to make a request to the broker service, which is the one we started now. So back the Postman and then make a request. So it ran, so it returned a response to us. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is to try to start the container for the authentication service. The same thing, but this time around, the image we are running is different, which is the auth app, and the container name, we are going to give it a different name, and we're going to specify the port too, which will be port 8081. Broker was on 8080, while authentication will be on 8081. Of course, you should know these are different applications, but along the line, they will communicate with each other, and we may not need to expose those ports that we are exposing now. We are going to only expose port 8080, the broker service, when the application mature a little bit. But now, because we are testing, we want to make sure that these setups are working. We have those ports exposed so that when we make those calls, we should receive response and be sure they are working. But we are going to change that situation and make sure that it's only the broker port that is exposed. And if you want to access the auth service or the inventory service, it must go through the broker, which will then serve as load balancer and make calls via TCP calls, which is gRPC, to retrieve any response for us. Okay, so let's go back to so I'm going to use another terminal and then access the auth service. So we're already in auth service, right? But for clarity, let me go back again so that people don't understand, we understand. So let me go into auth service and start the Docker container. All right, so cd clear. So how do we do that? We say docker run, just like we did the other time. Okay, docker run iterative. For I'm repeating it, I may not repeat it again, right? And then we say dash rm. So I'm becoming lazy. I just needed to go and copy it, but that's fine. Let me call it let me give it a name. Let me call it auth service, and then what port we want it to run. It will be on 8081, and it's going to run auth app. That is the name we gave the image that we built, right? We gave it auth app, and our container is going to run on auth service. That's the name we are going. So it will first, if it is existing, it will remove it. So why I added this dash rm was to remove any conflict. If you remember, the command I used was docker rm remove the container ID, and we were able to rerun the broker service because I didn't use this particular tag while running it, but I added this tag now so that as I'm rerunning, anytime and it find out that there's a conflict, it doesn't need to remind me that there's a conflict. It deletes it by itself and start my application, right? So that makes sense now. So this is going to run on port 8081, right? So when we go to access the Postman, everything should work correctly. Let's go. That should be on port 8081. So we are not getting a response, so that means there should be a problem. So why are we not getting a response? Let's go back and see. Docker run. Okay, so you can see there's a problem with what I have here. I didn't specify this correctly, so let's go back and correct what we have here. This should be 8081. So if it were the way I ran it using your previous command on broker, I will have conflict because I want to start it again and the auth service is existing. But because I added this, I won't have a conflict again. It will delete it and create a new one for me without issue. Good. So you can see no conflict, and we should be able to have this run now. Good. So the auth service is working. So we've created Docker images and we are running Docker containers for these repositories or different microservices. You can see that we have a lot of command that we are working with. And that's why we need to organize them into a make file, because this is going to be difficult for us to keep remembering and retyping and repasting, right? So, but for the purpose of this course, we are doing it so that we will see how we, iterate over time. So the next service I'm going to start is the inventory service, which is on port 8082. So let's go to the root directory. We are already on inventory service, but like I like to do, I want to go back so that it will be very clear for everybody what we are doing. So let's seed into this, clear, and then we are going to do the same thing that we did for other services. So what do? We say docker run dash iterative, and if it's existing, please delete, right? And we'll give it a name. Let's call it inventory service, right? And what port is it going to run on? 8082. So let me reduce it so that we can, 8082. And what is the image that we are trying to build this container from? We called it inventory app, if you remember. Inventory app. Let me still reduce this, right? So docker run in iterative mode, remove any inventory service if it exists, name our containers that is running inventory service on port 8082, and then from which image we are running it from the inventory app that we've already created. So this is working. Let's go to Postman. Okay. So that is fantastic. We were able to run these different microservices, the inventory, the broker, the authentication services, exposing these ports, building the binaries, running these binaries using Docker images, and everything is working as planned, right? So we've done the first step. So from what you see we have a lot of command that we are working with, right? And this command is not something easy to always remember. You must have it somewhere. You reuse it most times. So to make this thing easier for us, I'm going to create a make file that will hold all this command, and we just use make commands to kind of run this application. The make command, we're going to use the make command to do step one. Use the make command to run the Docker images. So step one and step two, those commands that we use, we are going to convert it into a makefile command and then use it consistently. All right, so that is what we are going to do. So to do that, I will create a different folder that is going to serve as a setup folder for us. Okay, I'll create a different folder. So let me create a folder in the root of my working directory. Let me call it microservice gRPC setup. So I'm going to push it to the repository too. Let me call it setup. Okay, so within this setup, I'm going to create a make file. So you have to have make installed on your system if you don't have make installed. So within this file, within this new folder that I created, let me create a file called makefile. Right. So make is the software you need to install to be able to use this particular file, right? So that we can organize our commands and don't need to keep pasting and repeating it. So what do we want to do? I'll first of all go to the terminal and stop all this that is running. Okay. Let me stop this too. Let me stop this too. All right. So if I go to docker ps-a, I should see, yeah, I have this. So let me delete this to avoid conflicts. Right. So docker ps-a, I will not see any service. Good. All right. So you remember I built the binaries. I use specific commands to build them, right? So let me go back so that we can see those commands and reuse it. Let me go back. Maybe we'll find them. Maybe we may not find them. But be that okay, good. So you can see this is the command I used to build the broker service, the inventory service, and the authentication service. So I don't want to have these commands typing them always. So let me, organize it into a make file. Okay. So what I will do basically is, let me just copy it, and then inside my make file, well, let me call the command, first command, build broker, right? Because most times when we make changes to this our code base, we need to rebuild. So we'll constantly build. So we don't want to always have this long line of code typed out just to rebuild. Okay. When you make changes, we will rebuild and test. Okay. So let me do, so of course the make file is in a different folder in the root directory called this, which I will push to the GitHub repository, of course. So since it is in a different folder, what should happen is that it should check out to the folder, to the broker repository, that's or the broker folder that we are working with. Okay, it should check out into it and then try to execute the build command to generate this broker binary for us. So what I will do is to say cd dot dot, and then of course, what is the name of this? Is called microservices. Let me just copy this name of the folder that is going to check into, of course. So we're going to go one step then into the gRPC broker service. Of course, you can do this any way you want, but because I'm within the same repository, I can do this easily, right? So when I check in, I can then execute that command I have here, right? So of course, this is the command we used to build, if you remember, right? So but in this case, we are checking into what? Broker. So I'm pasting and copy and pasting, right? So build is going to build broker for us. So we're going to test out this command. So the next command we are going to create is should build alt. How to build alt? So the command for building alt, we will keep repeating it. So instead of us having to do that, let's just have this command for us. So let me just copy this and make changes to it. So I think the folder for that is alt service, right? That's what we called it. Alt service. Let me confirm. So yeah, alt service, that's what we call it. And then our binary, what do we call it? We call it alt app. Of course, look at it here, alt app, this, right? Good. So this command will check into our alt folder, then execute the build command for us, build every files found within this folder. So the next repository or microservice that we need to build is let's call it build inventory. So I think, what do we call that folder? Okay, inventory. So let me just rename it inventory. Okay, inventory, and then we called it inventory app, right? Inventory app, right? So let's go through the commands again. Build broker, we check into the folder for the broker application, and then build we have a binary called broker app. They build alt, we of course go and do the same thing. We have a binary called alt app, and then the inventory, we do the same thing, the inventory folder, built all the files we needed to build, which is this, and the output will be inventory app, right? So for us to test, let's delete all the binaries that was created previously and then try to create it again using this particular command that we just created. So the broker, so let's delete these two, right? And then in the inventory, yes, let's delete the previous one. Good. So we don't have those binaries again. So let's try to create those binaries using this, okay, using this command we created. So you have to have make installed on your system. If you don't have make, if you're using Windows, you need to also install make. So by the way, I'm going to attach a file for these various commands for people on Windows. This command is going to work perfectly for people using Mac or Linux, but for people on Windows, some of this command will not work. So this is just for you to know in case you are using Windows and you try this command isn't working, you should know it will not work because I'm using Mac. People using Linux, it will also work for them. I'm going to include another file, and you'll see Windows as part of the name for that file, specifically for people on Windows. Okay, so let's try to create our binaries using this command. Let's go to the terminal. So let me go to the root of this application. Clear. Of course, you know I created a different folder for the makefile and I called it setup. So let's seed into this setup. When I ls, you see the makefile. Okay, if I say cat makefile, you can see the different commands I have. So let's build for broker. So make build broker. So instead of us having to type out all these long lines, you see there's no need again because we can just say make build broker. It will execute this line for us. Okay, so you can see this is easier. Good. So it ran easily. So let's go to our broker and see if we can find any new broker app. Sure, it came. You know, we deleted it. If you remember, in the auth service, you can see we don't have auth app. So let's try for auth and see if it's going to create the auth app for us. Go back, and this is the command. So let's say make build auth. Good. Let's check. You can see auth binary was created. So let's do same for the inventory. So let's say make build inventory. Good. So let's check inventory. It was created for us. Fantastic, right? So we also did the same thing. If you remember, we also have commands that we ran for starting the Docker container, where we have to, if you go to the where we run this command to kind of start the container, right? So we want to also add it as part of our make commands, right? So that it will be very easy for us to run. Okay, so let's go back. I hope I'm going to see this command, but if we don't see it, we can create a new one. So let's go to the make file for that we have, and then create those files that we've created. So what do we call it? Let's say start broker. That's the command I will call it for starting broker, and then start auth. Okay, oh, this is wrong. Here, start auth. I'll have start inventory. All right, so we are going to create its own command that is going to use. So of course it's going to be the same thing. We are going to check into this folder, right? We are all going to check into this folder for each, right? So I'm just copying what I have here because yes, the first step will be for us to first of all check into those different folder and then build, right? So the first command we used to start the Docker container was to say, if you remember very well, what did we say? We started with docker run, right? And then we say iterative, and then I said rm. So let me add this rm now, and then let's give it a name. What name should I give this? Let's say broker service. Okay, and it's going to run on a specific port, so let's call it 8080, right? If you remember very well. And then the image is going to utilize is the broker app, right? So this is what I used to start that container at that particular point in time. Of course, I've stopped all those containers, so if we go back to our Postman to access it, it's not going to run because I've stopped the containers and it's not going to run. Okay, so but because we are adding it into our makefile, what we need to do is just say make start broker. It will build, and then okay, it doesn't need to build actually because we already have a build command, but if we want it to always build, we can also make that to happen, right? It will build and then starts our service on using this command on port 8080 and from broker image, and the service name will be broker service. So the second one will be docker run iterative. Let's say remove if you find, let's give it a name, let's say port service, right? Dash p port service on port 8081, right? From what image? Alt app, that's the image name. So the same thing here, let's say docker run, right? This I have a mistake here, there should be I here, right? rm, let's give it a name, let's call it inventory service, and it's going to run on what ports? 8082, 82, and from what image is going to be inventory app, that's the image we called it, right? So if everything works well, this command should work. So let's go through it again. What happens is I checked into my broker service, then execute the command docker run in iterative mode, remove if you find, run it on port 8080 from this particular image. So the same thing applies for the alt service. Check into the alt folder, run docker run in iterative mode, remove if you find any already running to avoid conflicts, run it on port 8081 and from the image alt app. The same thing for inventory service. Check into the inventory folder that we already have. Of course, these folders are here, right? So this is the setup folder that have this makefile that I'm editing. So it's just going one step and then checking into these different folders, right? So docker run iterative, remove inventory service if you find one, start another service called inventory service on port 8082 from this image, inventory app, right? So time for truth. Let's go back to our I think, yeah, to the setup folder that harbors the makefile. Of course, if I cut makefile, you can see the different commands, right? Of course, we've built it, we've done this already. Okay, so let's try to, instead of us to run this long command, you can see using make, it makes it easy for us, right? So we just say make start broker. So let's see what happens. Fantastic. So broker is running on port 8080. Let's go and test it. It's running, no issues. So that's fine. Let me stop it. Let me do for alt make port is running on port 8081. Let's go to Postman. I think this is the, you can see, yeah, right. So it's working. So let's clear the screen. Cat makefile again so that we can see the commands. So the last one is inventory, right? So let's say make start inventory. Port 8082. Let's go to Postman. Yeah. Of course, these are dummy responses, right? Or if you follow the first videos, you'll see that we already have these dummy responses. So from step 1 to step 4 is working without issues. So let's go back to our code. Let's go to our diagram. So we've just finished step 5, which is create makefile. Perfectly working. All right, no issues. So the last step is, of course, you can see how I did this. I have to stop my inventory service, stop it, start my broker service, stop it, start my my alt service from what I have here, even though I have the make command, right? What would have happened was I would have to open different terminals, start my broker service, start my alt service, start my inventory service, and then go and test on Postman because they are different services. But because I want to make things easier for you guys and for you to be a senior engineer and know how to do these things, we are going to manage this using Docker Compose, right? So Docker Compose, using Docker Compose, we can use one command to start all these things without having to come back, start the broker, stop it, start the alt service, stop it, start the inventory service, stop it, just to test for our testing purpose. But if I want to run all of them together without stopping each of them and testing out, I will have to open 3 terminals and start those commands: make start broker, make start alt, make start inventory on 3 different terminals. So which will run without issue. But we want to be seniors, right? So I'm going to create, the next step is to create a Docker Compose file and then have it manage these different Docker containers. And with one command, it is going to start all of them and run them on the same terminal, and then we go and test everything at the same time in our Postman. Right, guys? So let's delve in. So let's go back. So this is the last step, creating the Docker Compose file. That's the last thing we want to do here. Okay. So what we'll do within this our setup file that has this makefile, I'm going to create another file. Let me call it Docker compose.yaml. Right. So how do you write a Docker Compose file? So you can check online on the Docker Compose documentation and see how to write these services. But because that is not the focus of this code, we're going to go direct and create these services and test it out. So what do you start with? You just say services column, and then you give a tab. The first service we want to create is the broker service, of course, the broker repository, right? If you remember, broker service. And then we say build, right? I will not be explaining this in depth, right? So build is going to specify the context where we are building from, right? So we say context, and then of course, because we are in our setup folder, we'll have to go one step back to check into any of these repositories, right? So I'm going to say dot dot, and then which repository am I going to check out to? I'll say microservice. So I'm checking to the broker service, which is microservices gRPC broker service. So let me just copy this name so that I will not make mistake. Let me just copy it. So right, and then this is the contents and what file do we want to run. So I'll just say Docker file. Docker file will be this, right? And then we'll have Docker file. This, I'll have to change it, make it capital. right? So restart, let's say always, so it's going to restart anytime there's an error in the container. So that's why. So let's specify the port. If you remember from what we have initially from the makefile, you can see that I have the ports 8080, right? So in the Docker Compose file, I'm going to specify those ports because it's going to manage these commands for us, right? So in one go, it starts all these services for us, okay? So what are the ports in my Docker Compose.yaml? So I'm going to specify, of course, 8080, 8080, okay? So that is it. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to say deploy, right? So deploy, let's say mood, mood should be replicated. So when it's deployed and it stops, right, it should be able to start another container, especially maybe when we are using Kubernetes, for instance. So mood replicated, and then what would be the replicas, right? So the replica will be always one, okay? So that is it. So this is the broker service. We've created the broker service. This is the name. So that's the name. And then contents, we specify the folder that we want it to be the contents. That is the broker service folder. And then the file, that is our Docker file. If you remember, this is our Docker file for that we created. This is it. Okay. So good. So if you have it, then restart always the port, deploy, of course, replicas one. So that is it for broker service. So we're going to repeat this for the auth service and for the inventory service. So because I'm lazy, I'm going to copy this and paste. Okay. I'll call this edit auth service. This is going to be auth service. Just edit it. This is going to be auth. Okay. And auth is on port 8081, right? Fantastic. So let's do same for inventory. Inventory. Let's call it inventory service. Let me edit this. Right, so I did this. And inventory is going to start port 8082. Good. So let's go through this Docker Compose.yaml once again. Why do we need Docker Compose.yaml? What is the purpose? From my makefile, I have 3 different commands to start broker, auth, and inventory, right? And if I have to do it this way, I have to open 3 terminals, start this command, make start broker, make start auth, make start inventory. They'll be running very well. Go to my Postman, run it, build my application. No issues. Fantastic. It's working well, but let's take it a notch above. So I created a Docker Compose file to manage this in a single place, right? Where I don't need to have different terminals kind of starting these services, right? So I defined my compose file, right, as services. It's called services. So the first one, this first one, start broker, was defined as this. The second one, start auth, was defined as this, right? The third one, start inventory, was defined as this. So in other words, we don't need this code again. We can still have it here and use it to play around or test, or even use it to, if you prefer to use this method, fine. But I will no longer be using this again because I've defined it in Docker Compose YAML file, in one place to manage everything. And when I start my Docker Compose, it's going to run all the services for me, right? So that is it. So let's now go and test this and see if it's working. This is the moment of truth. If it doesn't work, we'll come back and troubleshoot. That's why we are here. Okay, so let's be sure. 8080, 8081, this 8082. Go back to the terminal, clear. Right, so I have my Docker Compose the YAML. So how do you start or run a Docker Compose file? You say Docker compose up, and let's wait. So fantastic. So it's building, right? It's building, as you can see. So everything started port 8081, port 8082, port 8080. So let's go to the Postman and test. Right. Fantastic. So we've built our Docker Compose file, which is the last step within what we want to do. Create doc, which is step 6. So we've been able to do these things. So to take it a notch again, maybe I will want to, use makefile to start this Docker Compose instead of saying, let me Control C to stop. Instead of saying Docker Compose up, I may want to say instead make start. Right, make start. It will now run this command for us, Docker Compose up. Okay, so maybe I'm going to do that. So let's go to my terminal and just say, let me say start, and I'll say Docker Compose up. Right, so for you to stop it, instead of saying Control C to stop everything running on terminal, we can just say make stop. Right, so I'll say stop, and then I'll say I'll now say Docker Compose down. Right, so that's it. So if I go to my terminal again, let me clear it. I'll no longer say Docker Compose up, of course, which starts everything. Let me Control C to stop. So I will now say make start. It does the same thing, right? If I want to stop it, let me go to my terminal. If I want to stop this, let me use this. Let me go to the root cd. So if I want to stop it, I can just say make stop instead of Docker Compose. So instead of doing Docker Compose down, which is going to stop, of course, is going to stop it, right? So let me start it again. Make started. So instead of doing Docker Compose down, I can just say make stop, and it stops everything. When I say Docker PS, you will not see any running container. So guys, this is a very, very comprehensive instructions on how to do what we've done, what we've achieved. So we achieved quite a lot. So let's go back and see what we are trying to do. So of course, this has been explained most often, and this is what we did. We built the binaries of the auth, broker, and inventory service. We created a Docker file for the above services. We built Docker images for them. We run the Docker images. We created a makefile, and we create a Docker Compose file to manage the Docker services that we've created above. So guys, I hope you found this particular video very helpful. This is the third video in the series of videos we are creating on how to build microservices in Golang using gRPC, Postgres, right? And then we are building 3 services that will be communicate through this TCP connection, which is gRPC. And this is the third video, which is a step ahead. And the next video will possibly be how to now add Postgres container and then connect our application to database. Okay, that is going to be the next thing we're going to do in the next video. So thank you very much. If you like this video, please subscribe, like, and share. As always, I am your boy Obinna. Take care.